I'm Kim Dodsworth, Queensland storyteller. Today's story, Dogs, transcends mere entertainment. It's by prize-winning author Marnie Walters-Burgess of Kilcoven, Queensland. Her story describes with raw and intense reality the abject terror of a woman held hostage in a violent and loveless marriage. Torture has become her daily lot, meted out by a degenerate control freak of a man, her so-called husband. Bravely, she finally decides to take her courage in both hands and escape this monster. That's the story. And it's a highly relevant one for Australia today, unlocking as it does the doors of those private domestic worlds where cowardly bullies thrive. Furthermore, the story underlines the crying need for concerted action to help stamp out this social obscenity which more and more has been dominating our daily media. Dogs was a major prize winner in the Bendigo Bank Literary Awards of 2012. I commend for your serious listening Dogs by Marnie Walters-Burgess. It was terrible. The knowing. The moment the front door of their house slammed shut, the torment would begin. Verbally at first, then graduating to physical. Tomorrow would need explanation. Walked into the door again. Despondently, she watched the moonlit scenery flashing by the car window as he made the left turn into Friars Road, their road, and she wished for the courage to throw herself out the door. Instead, she contemplated the shadowy forms of the two shepherd guard dogs patrolling the property on the Friars Road T intersection. As always, whenever a vehicle passed, they ran back and forth behind the 3-metre fence that imprisoned them, guarding whatever it was their owner was so keen to protect. Maybe she should get a German shepherd, she thought dismally, one that would protect her from her husband. No use, she thought, as they passed the neighbour's front gate. He'd shoot it, like he'd shot her cat. The house was quite a distance from the road, and she counted every bump that brought them closer. He was berating her for not smiling at the party, for not drinking. Gradually the invective increased. He was revving himself up. When they went inside, he would have reached the physical stage. Then the slaps would start. She knew the slaps would intensify, just as she knew the night would end in rape. As he turned off the ignition, she squeezed her eyes shut and felt tears pressing from the corners. "Get out," he ordered, and she preceded him to the front door. He walked so close behind her, she could feel his breath as his voice sounded an endless monologue of her shortcomings. "Last time I'm taking you anywhere." She heard the front door slam behind them, shutting out the world, and her fear cut a jagged line through her responses. In the morning, when he'd slept off his demons, she was alone. He'd gone off to the cattle sales, and she, grateful he would not return until late afternoon, took a shower. When she looked in the mirror, the tears returned. She wondered that she had any left. There was nothing broken. He was too smart for that. But her face was a jelly of swelling and cuts, and her body vibrated with pain. Red welts from the electric cord crisscrossed her skin, and her left hand throbbed. There, beneath the gentleness of the water, she reviewed the nightmare that had become her life, and she came to a startling decision, one she had been too terrorized to look in the eye. She was going to leave. Once made, the decision seemed to acquire a power of its own. There were no children, and her ownership of anything had been carefully removed, just as her self-respect had been removed. Despite the opinion of her family, She had loved him, though, and this was her punishment. A punishment she couldn't continue to accept. This was the final time. As she carefully toweled herself, she began to see her future as her own, the way it used to be before she married him. There was no car. He had long ago made sure she was isolated, but packing diffused both the physical and mental pain. It was the representation of her daring. There wasn't much. A change of clothes, a thin blanket, her old cat's collar, a toothbrush. She stuffed everything in her backpack, and she reckoned she could walk to town by lunchtime. There'd be a bus. Choosing a wide, floppy hat, she shouldered the pack and walked out the front door for the last time. It took some time before the fear subsided. What if he came home early and found her on the road? What if he saw her waiting at the bus stop? What if the bus was late? There was no returning, though. She would meet each what if as she encountered it. She watched her boots alternate against the dusty road, all senses extended for the sound of an engine. Friars Road ended in a steady hill where it intersected the road to town. From the bottom she could just make out the dog fence on the intersection. The what-ifs began again. What if the gates were open? What if the dogs were out? She calmed herself. The gates were never open, and there was 3 meters of hinge lock topped with barbed wire between the dogs and the road. She'd walk along the far side. Regrowth along the roadside made it difficult to locate the dogs. She didn't know why, but she wanted them in sight. She forced herself forward, knowing her stress was having a party with her imagination. 1 foot in front of the other, she told herself. She'd be in town in no time. It must have been a premonition, she thought wildly as she paced the fence. Ahead, the gates came into clear view, and they swung, unfastened. The dogs were gone. She paused, her bravery faltering. Devoid of houses, the town road disappeared both ways, and she braced herself to continue. She heard the town hall clock strike midday as she peered through the mesh, hoping a car would come. On this unusual day, she'd take the chance and hitchhike. But no engine sound manifested. Still, she thought, the walk to town should only take half an hour from the turnoff. A sudden wind gust snatched the floppy hat from her head. As she turned to retrieve it, she saw them, the dogs, and they had seen her. Now they were loping towards her, heads low, ears pricked. Her first instinct was flight. Stretching either way ran the tall fence, with the gates at least 400 meters away. She'd never make it. Her panicking thoughts reminded her of something her husband had once told her about savage dogs. Never eyeball them. If she did, he said, they'd attack. She weighed less than 60 kilos. She'd have no chance against 2 strong dogs, out here, alone. Never eyeball them. She could hear their feet skittering on the gravel, and the flesh of her legs crawled. Her imagination provided the fear. She could feel the fangs driving into her flesh. There'd be blood. She shuddered. Never eyeball them. They were on her now, and with a sobbing breath, she looked up to the treetops. Her breath rate increased as though she had just run a race. She could feel them circling her, growling, bumping with their bodies as she sweated and sobbed in the hard sun, but she refused to look down. When she heard them move away, she took a cautious step towards the road. Instantly, both dogs collided with her again, and she could feel a scream welling up in her throat. Never eyeball them. She continued her study of the sky. The sun speared at her bruised face, stinging it with sweat, and the backpack sank into her shoulders. She dared not move to relieve it. If she did, the dogs would return. They came so close she could smell them, stale water and meat. Why were they out? She thought desperately. Where was their owner? They began to direct her, like a herd animal, but she refused to move. Her body shook, and her fear unfurled like a white flag, while her sweat-dampened clothes clung to her skin. One of them ran off on a random circuit, while the other circled her, rumbling out a sound heard by a million years of prey. It was hard not to look down. She wanted so badly to look down. Put on the authoritative voice. Go and sit. Make them do as they were told. Would they? Natural curiosity goaded her, but the warning kept rolling past her consciousness. Never eyeball them. The dogs continued to shove her, snapping at each other in confusion. She began to cry. If no one came, what would she do? In the distance, towards town, she heard two things: the single chime of the town hall clock and a car. She'd been there for half an hour. As the car drew closer, its familiarity danced in her senses. It didn't matter that it was his car. He was coming home early from the cattle sales. He could save her. The closer he came, the more the dogs harassed her. She stood by the road, too afraid to move, her face burning from the noon sun, her clothes wet. The pack straps cut heavily into her shoulders, and the front of her dusty T-shirt was streaked with tears. When the car drew up, he leaned across to the passenger side window, laughing. Suppose you want a lift? She was grateful to fling the pack on the seat, but when she went to follow it, he pressed the accelerator, cleverly holding the speed of the car out of her reach. The dog snapped after her. Please, she begged, please stop. He laughed again, and as she grabbed the door to swing herself up, she saw the shotgun barrel aim across her shoulder. The blast bit into her ear. She heard a yelp. Well, he said, still laughing above the residual ringing of the explosion, that's got rid of one bitch. She slammed the door and began to cry as he made the left turn into Friars Road.